Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you back to our second session of this training, or rather this course after the continuous assessment test. I hope you are in good shape. Even me, I'm in good shape here. I am moving on well. I have also taken a long break the days you have been away doing the cuts. I have also been concentrating on other matters. Now, welcome back to Brand Institute of Forensics and Security. We are continuing with our course on fire safety protection, and we are commencing with lesson 6 now, basic fire prevention measures. We are going to talk about very important prevention measures that you should implement at your workplace. You should implement at your workplace. As I have mentioned several occasions, don't wait until you are told to do these things. Do it by yourself and implement these things. And if you are not the direct manager, then when you have meetings, forums, speak up and say, we need this, we need this, we need fire emergency plan, we need evacuation plans, we need to do this here. Be a contributor to what is happening in terms of fire safety and overall security of your facility. Lesson 6, I hope the last lesson, lesson 5, and also the case studies was interesting to you. I hope you learned various valuable lessons pertaining to this subject matter. Now we are going to talk about fire safety management. Fire safety management is a role of the security team. Is a role of the security team led by the security manager together with the rest of his team, his assistant, the security officers, the security supervisors, the security guards, everybody in the security team should be involved in fire safety management. Fire safety management comprises of measures put in place to prevent, prepare, respond to, or recover from a fire emergency. This is what we call fire safety management measures. Fire prevention is therefore a part of fire safety management. Fire prevention is a part of fire safety management. So we say fire safety management includes prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery from a fire emergency. And what is fire prevention? Sound fire prevention practices are based upon the principle of keeping fuel and ignition sources apart. Keeping fuel and ignition sources apart. Remember the triangle. Remember, we talked about that. So, sound fire prevention practices are based upon the principles of keeping fuel and ignition sources apart. Note that. Fire prevention and fire safety in the workplace. Fire prevention and fire safety in the workplace is everyone's responsibility. It is very important to train all employees on proper fire safety procedures and to put into place a fire prevention plan in case a fire breaks out in the workplace. To put in place a fire prevention plan. By adhering to OSHA standard requirements, possible fire incidences can be eliminated before they begin. Even in our country, we have our own regulations, fire safety regulation. So we say by adhering to those requirements, then possible fire incidences can be eliminated before they begin. One great way of preventing fire in the workplace is by placing the correct equipment in the building. Placing the correct equipment in the building. This one is very important. For example, in server rooms, where we have a lot of electrical wire connections and electrical equipment, server rooms, then in server rooms, the correct fire equipment to put there is carbon dioxide, CO2, not water. That is what we mean when we say one great way of preventing fires in the workplace is by placing the correct equipment in the building. In each location, you need to ensure equipment placed there is appropriate. Where there is a high risk of electrical fire, then you need to place there electrical fire extinguishing extinguishers. Where there is a high risk of liquid fire, like in the kitchen, then you need to put there extinguishers that are suitable for that location. That is what we mean by preventing fires in the workplace, is by placing the correct equipment in the building. The following items should be placed inside or near the building. The following items should be placed inside or near the building. And I wish you can write them down so that you can patrol at your premises or your building and check if these things are in place. Number one, there should be a fire alarm system. There should be a fire alarm system. Number two, there should be fire doors and or shutters. Fire doors and or shutters. Number four, there should be fire hydrants that are operational. Fire hydrants that are operational. And then automatic sprinkler system. Sprinkler heads should be protected against potential damage. And then there should be enough fire extinguishers mounted and easily accessible to all employees. This one is very important because sometimes we find fire extinguishers are not mounted, or fire extinguishers are placed at a place where they are inaccessible. You cannot reach them, or they are covered with other items. So take note of fire extinguishers mounting and accessibility. And then all facilities should have an exit or egress, the action of leaving a place, the building in case of fire. How do you exit? How do you leave? How do you egress from the building in case of fire, or part of the building in case of fire? And then emergency exits must be marked clearly with a sign that is, yes, lit up and the exit is not blocked. Sorry, there was this one inconvenience, so I had to leave for a few minutes. Then emergency exits must be marked clearly with a sign that is lit up and the exit is not blocked. If there are other doors inside the building, those doors must also be clearly marked, not an exit or storage closet. If a fire escape is located outside of the second floor window, it needs to work properly and be inspected yearly. If a fire escape is located outside of the second floor window, it needs to work properly and be inspected yearly. And then structural or non-structural. Fire prevention can be structural or non-structural. So just take note that fire prevention can be structural or non-structural. When we talk about structural fire prevention, involves putting in place physical measures that would help prevent fire, e.g., incorporating emergency exits, escape routes, fire detection systems, fire suppression systems, compartmentalization, fire resistance doors, etc. This is what we call structural. And then non-structural fire prevention involves non-physical measures, e.g., safety audits, inspections, regulations, awareness training, drills, restriction of smoking and open fire, waste disposal, proper fuel storage, etc. So structural fire, we can say these are physical, and non-structural fire prevention is what we call non-physical measures. Non-physical measures, policies, procedures, regulations, training, drills, these are all non-structural fire prevention measures. Fire safety management measures, we continue. Those are just part of the measures. You can see that their presentation is, these things link into each other as we move ahead. Fire safety management comprises of active, passive, and management safety measures. Fire safety management comprises of active, passive, and management safety measures. Active fire safety measures are systems which activate or are required to be activated in the event of an outbreak of fire. Active fire safety measures are systems which activate or are required to be activated in the event of an outbreak of fire. Active fire prevention measures would include fire detection and alarm systems, emergency lighting, and firefighting equipment. Passive fire safety measures are features which are built into the structure of the building and are physical features of the building. These features include the provision of escape routes and exits, the provision of fire resistance to the building structure, and the provision of access to and around the building. So this is what we call passive. Passive are features which are incorporated in the building, and these include the provision of escape routes and exits, provision of fire resistance to the building structure, and the provision of access to and around the building. Management safety measures are measures which relate to the day-to-day management of the fire safety in a building. There is a legal responsibility on persons having control over premises to take reasonable measure to prevent the occurrence of a fire and to protect the lives and safety of occupants in the event of a fire. These measures include staff training. We are talking about management safety measures, staff training, inspection and maintenance of the fire protection equipment, maintenance of the building and its services, maintenance of escape routes, liaison with the fire authority and assisting in the fire brigade, fire safety records registers, fire safety signs and notices, fire evacuation drills, emergency preparedness planning, and emergency procedures. Please, when you go back to your workplace, check if these measures are in place. If you are the manager, confirm that you have this under your fingertips. If you are a supervisor, if you are a security officer, confirm that you are aware of these things. Maintenance of escape routes, coordinating with the fire authority, assisting fire brigade, fire safety records and registers, fire safety signage and notices, fire evacuation drills, emergency preparedness planning, and emergency procedures. That is why I usually say in most organizations, people think security is a very narrow field. They think security is about constraining people from doing whatever they want to do. They don't realize that security carries a lot. If you are a security manager, you realize that you carry a lot of responsibility. And these are some of the responsibility as relates to fire safety, which is just part of security management. So we are just talking about fire safety, and you can see the number of things that we are talking about. Then we still have to talk about CCTV surveillance. We still have to talk about investigations. We still have to talk about occupational health and safety. We still need to talk about visitors control or access management. We still have, so you can see security is a very wide field. And when you become a security manager, you will see for yourself that on each and every day, you have huge responsibilities. Let's now talk about a fire safety program and a fire safety plan, management plan, which is still part of the fire safety management measures. Fire safety program or fire safety management plan. The management fire safety measures are developed into fire safety program or fire management plan. The fire safety manager of an organization is charged with the responsibility of drawing up, implementation, and overseeing the fire safety management program so as to ensure correct fire safety management and meet legal obligations. The elements of a fire safety program are based on the assumption that active and passive fire safety measures are present within a facility. The elements of a fire safety program are based on the assumption that active and passive fire safety measures are present within a facility. More stringent management fire safety measures are required in the absence of adequate active and passive fire safety measures. The fire safety program should set out the fire safety management policy, including a brief statement listing the names and positions of the persons responsible for managing the fire safety. More stringent management fire safety measures are required in the absence of adequate, active, and passive fire safety measures. The fire safety program should set out the fire safety management policy, including a brief statement listing the names and positions of the persons responsible for managing fire safety. In some organizations, the fire safety management is directly under the security manager. In some other facilities, they have a full department for the fire safety management. Like Kenya Pipeline, I know they have the overall director of security, but under the director of security, they have security managers, physical security manager, CCTV surveillance security manager, and then they also have a fire safety manager, because it is a huge responsibility when we talk about fire safety for a corporation like the Kenya Pipeline or the Kenya Airways, let's say. As we continue, we see that what are the elements of a fire safety program? Fire prevention measures, these can be structural or non-structural as listed below. One is emergency preparedness planning. So ask yourself, have you prepared for emergencies at your workplace? Are there plans for managing a fire emergency? The presence of good fire prevention measures doesn't mean that fire cannot occur. Emergency planning, therefore, considers the eventuality that a fire occurs in spite of prevention measures being in place. Hence, this is in order to effectively respond to a fire emergency in order to minimize the losses. Even if you have all the systems in place related to protection, you still need to have plans of response in case an emergency occurs. An emergency plan should be produced at the end of the planning process. The emergency plan should contain, among other hazards planned for, the actions, procedures to be taken in case of an emergency, list and contacts of emergency services to be contacted in case of fire, the roles, duties of all persons involved in response, command and coordination during an emergency, maps detailing the evacuation, escape routes, and location of firefighting equipment. Therefore, the emergency plan should contain, among other hazards planned for. In some organizations, the emergency plan is a single booklet containing all kinds of emergencies that can occur. However, in multinational or big corporations, it is separated into different emergency plans. For example, there is a specific plan for fire safety emergency management, a specific plan for counterterrorism or for active shooter attack situation, or a specific emergency plan for armed robbery or kidnapping. So in some organizations, they are all under one booklet, one manual, but in some other organizations, they are separated into sections depending on the emergency. Emergency procedures. They should include a procedure for raising the alarm. Security should know how to raise the alarm. A procedure for investigating alarms. How do you investigate an alarm? To confirm whether it is false or true. A procedure for calling the fire brigade and ambulance services. An evacuation procedure. A procedure for reporting to a designated location, assembly point, and accounting for each person in the premises, roll call. A procedure for fighting the fire, and a procedure for assisting the fire brigade. Remember, there is also the procedure for search and rescue. Procedure for search and rescue, that there's a fire and maybe some of the employees are trapped. How do we conduct search and rescue? We have done a head count. We have identified we are missing 5 people and they are within the building. How do we conduct a search and rescue? My dear security friends, this information should be documented in terms of procedures. There should be a procedure for raising the alarm. You go to some organizations, security team doesn't know how to raise the fire alarm. There should be a procedure for investigating alarms. Okay, there is a fire alarm. How do you investigate to confirm whether it is false or true? There's a procedure for calling the fire brigade. How far is the fire brigade from our facility and ambulance services? And then, very important, an evacuation procedure. Do we have an evacuation procedure? And do we even have an assembly point? And where is the assembly point? And how do we conduct head count? Those things are important. Evacuation procedures. Evacuation procedures should also be reflected in the emergency plan. Consideration should be given to the location of the fire, the seriousness and extent of the fire, the presence and extent of smoke, the proximity of flammable materials, whether the immediate action taken to control the fire is having the desired effect, the nature and type of residents in the vicinity. Those are some of the considerations in evacuation procedures. So these things should be documented. Learn as early as this how to prepare these documents. As you grow in your career, learn how to prepare these documents. Just to make an example, don't take it literally, because I might ask you one time to just detail the steps that you will take to prepare an evacuation procedure or an emergency plan. What are the contents and what would you require to prepare this one? Consideration should be given to priority in terms of evacuating persons with special needs, i.e. persons with disabilities, the sick, the old, or even children. The emergency plan should be regularly reviewed to adapt to the changing circumstances, e.g. updating of the emergency services and their contacts. Copies of the plan must also be distributed to staff and other emergency services stated in the emergency plan. When we were looking at case studies recently, we discussed the Nakumatt downtown fire incident, and we discovered that during investigation, it was discovered that most of the doors were locked from inside. So the people who were outside, they were unable to access the inside to evacuate people. And this was the reason, was that the security people were locking these doors to prevent people from looting. So people ended up dying, crumbling at the door and stepping on each other as they were attempting to exit the danger zone. So the emergency procedure plan should consider how do we conduct evacuation and how do we remove people from these premises if there is a huge fire occurrence. Fire evacuation drills should be conducted. Drills should be held at regular intervals to test the effectiveness of the plan. Unfortunately, most organizations don't conduct drills. This one I know. Most security managers fear to conduct drills. Most security directors fear to conduct drills. That should not be the case. People should be trained and people should be exercised on evacuation. So evacuation drills help create familiarity with the roles, emergency procedures, and exit facilities available in a facility. They also serve to educate staff as well as achieve an attitude of mind that reacts rationally when confronted with a fire or other emergency situation. They also test the availability and effectiveness of staff and identify shortcomings in the procedures. A review of the drill should be carried out in order to identify deficiencies and remedy them through making adjustments to the emergency plan. So drills also provide a room to make adjustments to the emergency plan. Emergency evacuation plan looks like this in most organizations. I hope you can see a little bit of what we are talking about, where you are and where are the assembly points and what should happen. You see, this is the assembly area. What should happen during assembly, at the assembly point, and how can you move from where you are and find an easiest exit that leads to the assembly point. So this plan should be well drawn and displayed in various parts of the facility or building. If it is a hotel, then these plans are usually placed behind each guest room door to show that from your room, this is the route to the assembly point. And during guest check-in, then they are taken through the procedure and told if there is a fire, you will move this way, this way, this way, this way, until you are able to reach the assembly point where you will be assisted by the management. Fire safety inspections. We also spoke about inspections when we are speaking about regulations. These are required to ensure the continued proper functioning of the active and passive fire safety measures and to detect dangerous practices. Inspections. Exit routes must be inspected to ensure they are unobstructed and are capable of being opened easily in case of fire. Patrols are very important. Rubbish and combustible waste should be checked for over accumulation and storage to ensure they are not in the vicinity of ignition sources or obstruct access for firefighting. Storage areas for these combustible materials should be clearly designated. Machinery and equipment should be checked regularly for signs of wear, damage, or overheating. Faulty equipment should be removed from use until repaired. Maintenance and servicing of fire equipment. Active fire prevention systems installed in the building require regular checking and maintenance to ensure their continuity, operation, and availability. Visual checks are required for most types of systems on a frequent basis, with full operational check by a trained person required at least once every year or as prescribed by existing fire codes. Maintenance and servicing is required for fire detection alarm systems, emergency lighting systems, fire extinguishers, hose reels, fire hydrants, and even fire sprinkler systems. Reference should be made to the installation codes for full details of the required type and frequency of maintenance checks. A record of servicing of the equipment should be made in the fire safety register. Staff instruction and training. The purpose of training is to establish and verify the organization's ability to prevent fires and effectively respond to fire emergencies. So staff instruction and training is very important. And I said in another forum, you have to add value to the organization as a security person by participating and conducting these trainings. So the purpose of training is to establish and verify the organization's ability to prevent fires and to effectively respond to emergencies. Training considerations should include the following: fire prevention duties, action to take in the event of a fire, when and how to evacuate, evacuation procedures, when to attempt to extinguish a fire, whom to notify and how, notification arrangements, and what equipments to shut down. Familiarity with the fire protection equipment, their location, operation, and maintenance is part of the training also. Handling of flammable liquids, how to safely handle, use, and store flammable liquids is also part of the training. And then arrangements for assisting the fire brigade. Fire control techniques, closing of doors and windows to inhibit fire growth and spread, shutting off electricity and fuel supplies where appropriate, roles of fire doors. Layout of the building, including escape routes. It is also important to train employees when they change jobs and also how to minimize fire occurrence and spread from machinery-based processes and operations, e.g. chemical handling. A record of the fire of the training conducted should be made in the fire safety register. So when you go back to your work area, ask yourself, do we have a fire safety register? And if we have a fire safety register, are there records showing when we last trained our staff? And when did we last train our staff? And what topics did we cover? Did we cover fire classes? Did we cover which equipment to use on which type of fire? Did we cover evacuation drill? Or did we cover escaping from smoke? What did we cover? It should be recorded. How many staff were trained? How many hours did the training take? Have we conducted any drills? So go back to your work area and check if you have a fire safety register. Maintenance of escape routes. This one is also very important, especially in the hotel industry. Escape routes can be vertical or horizontal. Horizontal escape routes are found in single-story buildings, whereas multi-story buildings contain both horizontal and vertical escape routes. Escape routes should be kept free from obstruction. They should also be kept safe from smoke and fire through keeping the fire doors closed at all times and always exit doors readily usable. You remember also when we talked about regulations and codes, we mentioned about frequent breaches or frequent breaches that can lead to fire occurrence. And we also spoke about ensuring escape routes are unobstructed. Escape routes should be inspected on a regular basis. Security. Emergency lighting should be checked to ensure proper functioning at all times. Any obstruction noticed in an escape route should be cleared immediately and steps taken to prevent its recurrence. And then we have some of just a drawing to show an escape route, how it looks like. And you go back also to your work area, see if you can identify these drawings that shows how you should escape from a particular area if there is a fire occurrence. And then fire safety register, fire safety records, we have spoken about that, so I'll not repeat it. The name of the fire safety manager and those nominated to deputize for him or her, the details of specific fire duties that have been assigned to staff, the details of instruction and training given to staff and by whom, and the date of each fire. If a fire occurs, it should be documented. All fire incidences must be documented. And then evacuation and the results of exercise held, we have spoken about that. Details of all fire incidents and false alarms that occur and the actions taken as a result. The register will serve as a record and also a checklist for the fire safety manager to ensure that checks and training which are required are being carried out on an ongoing basis. So registers, fire safety registers. Fire safety registers are very, very important. We, in this age, we usually like to store information online and using computer systems and whatever. However, it is still very important to keep information in manual or currency books and registers, because systems collapse, you may lose information, and then you don't have a historical basis to make other decisions as you move ahead. You need to at least have an occurrence book or a register where hard copies are maintained of issues that have occurred within the organization related to fire emergencies. Fire safety signs and notices. Signs are provided to show position of the protection equipment, direction of escape, and the location of exit doors and positions of the fire alarm call points. Now, no smoking signs should be provided at appropriate locations. Notices should be provided at appropriate locations to indicate procedures to be followed by staff in an emergency, such as on discovering a fire or on hearing the fire alarm. Staff should be familiar with the content of such notices. Mark important exits, fire department correct connections, potentially hazardous roof trusses, and necessary equipment with fire safety signs. In case the worst happen, make sure firefighters and the emergency personnel can find their way around. Remind occupants of a safe escape route in your facility to help them evacuate quickly. Glow in the dark materials help find everything needed at night or during a power outage. You know, green luminous. Then fit durable plastic fire hydrant rings over hydrants so they are easy to spot too. Also, these are some of the notices and signs that we are talking about. You are all familiar with the fire exit. You are all familiar with the location of fire equipment. You are all familiar with the fire action plan. Please go back and check your areas if these things are existing. Check and confirm if they are existing. If not, then you may need to advise your manager politely to ensure that these things are in place. Then a coordination with fire authorities. It may be necessary to continuously liaise and consult with the fire authorities in order to familiarize the fire brigade with the premises, ensure availability of access for firefighting by brigade, and appropriate facilities for use by the fire brigade, e.g. fire hydrants, assistance on fire safety management, and general advice on fire safety matters. So it is very important to stay in touch with the fire authorities, the fire brigade. Create friendships, create networks, even with the fire brigade at Nairobi, even with G4S. Create partnerships with these people. Do not, as I have always said, don't wait until there is an emergency so that you are looking for people. Create partnerships even during peace, so that when there is war, then you can easily get support that you need. Finally, we are going to talk about a recovery plan. This one we are going to cover it in lesson 11. The fire safety program should have a recovery plan for the emergencies to ensure quick restoration of organizational operations. This is called business continuity planning. A recovery plan will entail how and who to conduct investigations. So fire a recovery plan, we are going to talk about it in lesson 11. A recovery plan will entail how and who to conduct investigations, how to file insurance claims, if any, and backups in place to ensure there is continuity of operations to sustain the functioning of the organization. So recovery plan actually deals with a business continuity planning. And as a security person, these are the terms that you should be aware exist in the industry. Business continuity planning, that there is a disaster, we are moving away from beyond the disaster, we need to recover in business and what is required. That is a very, very important area of specialization that you should also be you should take keen, you should be aware of. If you look at fire safety management, you see that there are quite a number of issues. And I believe you have picked some points from this presentation that should go into the overall fire safety management. And there are quite a number of things that you need to take note of, and there are quite a number of issues that you need to put in place as you develop in your career. You should be aware of this, that when I join an organization as a security manager, there is what I need to do. I need to have in place several plans. And one of the plans that I need is a fire safety management plan, separate. CCTV surveillance management plan, separate. Investigation plan, separate. Handling lost and found plan, separate. Access control management plan, separate. Hazardous material handling plan, separate. These plans, you should know that, so that you have several folders, you have several files. You have several files, both soft copies, folders on your computer, your laptop, and also physical files as backup records. These are some of the things that you need. These are some of the things you need when you join the corporate world. Occupational health and safety file, first aid management issues file, all these things, physical security, employment of staff, termination of staff, investigation of your own people, of your security people. These things, you should have all these files in place, properly done, properly compiled, and everything is flowing together. If you are called forward to explain a particular area of your overall operations, then you can be able to provide answers. Thank you. We are going to continue from that point for our next lesson, which will be lesson number 7. So we are going to pick from here and continue as we move ahead. Thank you very much. All the best. See you next time.